In June 1815, something happened in London that would define how wars are financed for the next 2 centuries. While the Battle of Waterloo raged across Belgium, while Napoleon's army clashed with Wellington's forces, while the fate of Europe hung in the balance, one man stood in the London Stock Exchange and did something that would make his family richer than kings. Nathan Mayer Rothschild received news of Napoleon's defeat a full day before the British government did. He had established a network of couriers faster than any official communication system in Europe. And in those 24 hours, he made a fortune so vast that historians still argue about the exact amount. But here is what they do not teach you in school. Here is what the history books conveniently leave out. The Rothschilds did not just profit from that one battle. They had been financing both sides of the Napoleonic Wars for years. They had turned war itself into a business model. And that model is still running today. Let me show you exactly what happened. Because when you see the pattern, you will never look at modern conflicts the same way again. To understand how the Rothschilds built their empire, you first have to understand the world before them. In the late 1700s, wars were financed through direct taxation and seizure of assets. Kings borrowed from local merchants at ruinous interest rates. There was no sophisticated bond market, no international banking system, no way to move money quickly across borders during wartime. The Rothschild family changed all of that. Mayer Amschel Rothschild, the patriarch, started as a coin dealer in Frankfurt. But he understood something that would revolutionize finance. He understood that wars created opportunities for those who could move money when others could not. Mayer had 5 sons. And in the early 1800s, he sent them to 5 different European capitals: Frankfurt, London, Paris, Vienna, Naples. Each son established a banking house. Each son built relationships with local governments. And together, they created the first truly international banking network. When Britain needed gold to pay its armies fighting Napoleon in Spain, the Rothschilds could move it through France, through enemy territory, using a network of contacts and couriers that no government could match. They charged enormous fees for this service. But governments paid because they had no alternative. Here is where it gets interesting. The Rothschilds were not just financing Britain. They were financing both sides. While Nathan in London was moving British gold to Wellington's armies, James in Paris was arranging loans for the French government. Salomon in Vienna was financing the Austrian military. The family had positioned itself as the indispensable intermediary for every major power in Europe. They did not care who won the wars. They cared that the wars continued long enough for governments to need more loans. Between 1803 and 1815, the Rothschild family arranged financing for virtually every major European power involved in the Napoleonic Wars. The British government alone borrowed over £60 million, much of it facilitated through Rothschild networks. The family's wealth grew exponentially during this period. By 1815, they were the richest family in the world. Not through manufacturing, not through trade, but through war finance. The Waterloo moment was just the culmination. Nathan Rothschild had invested heavily in British government bonds, which had crashed in value as the war dragged on and people feared a French victory. When his courier brought news of Napoleon's defeat, Nathan began buying bonds before anyone else knew the outcome. Within hours, the news became public, bond prices soared, and Nathan made what some historians estimate was 20 times his investment. But the real fortune was not made in those 24 hours. The real fortune had been built over 12 years of war, financing both sides, ensuring that no matter who won any particular battle, the Rothschilds would be repaid. This created a perverse incentive. The longer wars lasted, the more money governments borrowed, the richer the Rothschilds became. There is no direct evidence that they deliberately prolonged conflicts. But there is extensive evidence that they advised governments on military financing in ways that made extended campaigns possible. They innovated bond instruments that allowed governments to borrow against future tax revenue. They created secondary markets where bonds could be traded, providing liquidity that kept credit flowing even as wars drained treasuries. After Waterloo, the Rothschilds did something unprecedented. They began financing the reconstruction of Europe. The same governments that had borrowed to fight now borrowed to rebuild. The Congress of Vienna, which redrew the map of Europe, was financed in part through Rothschild loans. The family had positioned itself as indispensable in both war and peace. They had created a system where government debt was the foundation of their wealth, and conflict was the engine that generated that debt. By the 1820s, the Rothschild family controlled an estimated 50% of the world's wealth. They had banking houses in every major European capital. They financed railways, mines, and industries. But the core of their fortune remained government bonds, particularly those issued during times of crisis. The pattern was clear. Crisis creates borrowing. Borrowing creates debt. Debt creates dependency. And those who control the debt control the nations. The Rothschilds were not unique in profiting from war. But they were unique in the scale and sophistication of their operations. They understood something that would become fundamental to modern finance. Governments at war have no choice but to borrow. They cannot wait for tax revenue. They cannot sell assets quickly enough. They need immediate liquidity, and they will pay almost any price to get it. Whoever provides that liquidity holds enormous power. Now here is what should terrify you about this history. The system the Rothschilds pioneered has not disappeared. It has evolved. It has become so embedded in how wars are financed that we do not even see it anymore. We think of war as a political or military phenomenon. We forget that every modern conflict is fundamentally a financial operation. Look at how wars are financed today. Governments issue bonds. Investment banks underwrite those bonds. Institutional investors buy those bonds. When conflict begins or intensifies, bond prices fluctuate wildly. Those who have advanced knowledge of military operations or diplomatic developments can make enormous profits trading those bonds. The names have changed. The mechanisms have modernized. But the fundamental pattern remains identical to what the Rothschilds established 210 years ago. Consider the Iraq War. The United States borrowed over $2 trillion to finance military operations. That money was raised through treasury bonds, sold to investors worldwide. Investment banks earned fees for underwriting and trading those bonds. Defense contractors borrowed money to expand production, issuing corporate bonds at favorable rates because of guaranteed government contracts. The entire conflict was, from a financial perspective, a massive debt creation machine. And just like in the Napoleonic era, the same financial institutions often had exposure to multiple sides. American banks financed U.S. operations while also holding debt from countries affected by the conflict. Or consider Ukraine today. Western governments are providing tens of billions in military aid, much of it financed through deficit spending and bond issuance. Those bonds are traded by the same investment banks that also hold exposure to Russian debt, Chinese debt, and debt from every country affected by the conflict. The financial system profits regardless of the outcome. The longer the conflict continues, the more borrowing occurs, the more trading volume, the more fees collected. This is not conspiracy. This is structure. Modern wars cannot be fought without massive borrowing. That borrowing creates opportunities for those who facilitate it. And those opportunities create incentives to ensure that conflicts, once started, do not end too quickly. No individual banker is sitting in a room plotting war. But the system itself has evolved to benefit from prolonged instability. The numbers tell the story. Global military expenditure in 2024 exceeded $2 trillion. Much of that is financed through government debt. The bond markets that trade that debt have a total value exceeding $130 trillion. Every time a government increases military spending, it issues more bonds. Every time tensions rise, bond traders position themselves for volatility. Every time a conflict escalates, someone profits from the price movements. And here is the part that makes it worse. The information advantage that Nathan Rothschild had in 1815 still exists today, just in different form. High-frequency traders position themselves microseconds ahead of market-moving news. Defense contractors know about procurement decisions before they are public. Intelligence agencies share information with financial institutions under national security arrangements. The playing field is not level. Some participants in this market have access to information that others do not. And they use that advantage to profit from events that cost ordinary people their savings, their homes, their lives. There is one more parallel I need to share with you, and this one is perhaps the most chilling of all. In 1830, the Rothschilds financed both sides of the Belgian Revolution. Belgium was breaking away from the Netherlands, and both the revolutionary government and the Dutch monarchy needed money. The Rothschilds provided it. The conflict lasted just over a year, and when it ended, both governments were indebted to the same family. The Rothschilds had no ideological preference for Belgian independence or Dutch unity. They had a financial preference for both sides borrowing as much as possible. Today, major financial institutions hold sovereign debt from countries currently in conflict with each other. They finance defense contractors selling weapons to opposing sides. They trade currencies and commodities affected by those conflicts. They are, in effect, doing exactly what the Rothschilds did, but through corporate structures so complex that no single family name appears on the transactions. The system has been depersonalized. The incentives remain the same. What does this mean for you? It means that when you hear about rising geopolitical tensions, about military buildups, about conflicts in distant regions, you should ask a simple question. Who is financing this? Who benefits if this continues? Not in a conspiratorial sense, but in a structural sense. Because the system has been built, refined over 2 centuries, to ensure that war generates profit for those who control debt and trade volatility. The Rothschilds built their fortune by understanding that governments at war will borrow without limit and repay those debts through taxation of their populations for generations. That system is still operating. Your government borrows to finance military operations. You and your children repay that debt through taxes. The institutions that facilitated the borrowing collect fees and profit from trading the debt instruments. The cycle continues, conflict after conflict, generation after generation. I am not telling you this to make you feel hopeless. I am telling you this because understanding the financial structure of war changes how you see the world. When the Rothschilds financed both sides of the Napoleonic Wars, ordinary people had no idea it was happening. They thought wars were about ideology, territory, honor. They did not see the debt being created in their name. You have the advantage of seeing it. You can see how wars are financed. You can see who profits. You can see the incentives. The choice is yours. You can believe that modern conflicts are purely about security, democracy, or national interest. Or you can see them as the Rothschilds saw Waterloo. As financial events that create opportunities for those positioned to exploit them. As debt creation machines that transfer wealth from taxpayers to bondholders over decades. The pattern has not changed in 210 years. Only the names have changed. The timeline is not closing. The system is already here. The question is whether you see it.